Good afternoon and welcome to the AGM presentation 2021. I think that the shareholders know that I always look forward to the AGM. It's nice to meet everybody and I always enjoy to share our good story. So it's a pity that we can't be together now for the second year in a row, but it also makes me happy to invite you to my home and to share this year's presentation from my home office. Each year, as I review and prepare the presentation, it always strikes me what a difference a year makes. Only in 12 months, the business moves on so much. And the biggest difference compared to last year for me is uncertainty. If we look back 1 year ago, May of 2020, we were in the depths of the COVID crisis. The OEMs were in a lockdown, production had completely stopped. And we really didn't understand the virus. We didn't know how deep it would be. We didn't know how long it would last. And of course, consumers were nervous, so there was no market demand. And as we jump ahead now, 1 year to May 2021, even though the infection rates in some countries are higher than they were 12 months ago, I think that there's a much better confidence. We have a better understanding of the virus and how to work with it, with social distancing and so on. Production at most of the OEMs has more or less become normal. And likewise, the SinterCast production has more or less returned to the pre-COVID level. The vaccine rollout is underway, and most governments are providing stimulus to stimulate the economy. And the consumer confidence is high, particularly in our largest market of North America. So there's a real demand in the market. And I think that we're in a good position this year. I think that we have a stable base, and I think that we have a really positive outlook, not only for the near term, but also for the long term. So what I would like to do today is to review the production of the last year and to try to put that into perspective. And then we can look at the near-term outlook and to the long-term outlook. So in this first slide, we review our production over the last 3 years prior to the COVID pandemic. And we see that we really had a strong growth in our production. We had 19% growth in 2018 and 30% growth in 2019. And coming into 2020, we gave the guidance that after 2 strong years of growth, the series production growth in 2020 would be more modest. We didn't give a number, but internally our forecast indicated about 5%. At the same time, we said that 2020 would be a very strong year for installations. We had set a record year for installations in 2019 with 10.9 million Swedish crowns of revenue. And we said that we would beat that in 2020. And internally, I was hoping that we could reach 20 million. We didn't quite get there. We finished at 16.6 million. But we did deliver on the commitment for a strong installation year and a second consecutive year of installation record revenue. And what I would like to do to put the last year and a half in perspective is to see the series production development month by month. And we can see it in this plot that in January and February, the production was quite normal. I can remember sitting in the boardroom in February discussing the problems of this virus in China and whether or not it would hit us in the West. We really didn't know, but within a month, many of our foundries had started to close. And by April, more or less all of our large foundry partners had gone on lockdown. And so that was our low point of 1.0 million engine equivalents. So we dropped from 3.3 million in 2019 down to 1 million in April of 2020. From that point, you can see that the recovery was rather good. It was linear growth, people coming back on stream one by one. And we come to the next phase in this plot where we had stabilized at around 2.7 or 2.8 million engine equivalents. And I can remember back in April and May, in a management meeting discussing amongst the management team, where do we think we will finish by the end of the year? And as a coincidence, we all agreed that if we got back to 2.8 million, we would really be happy. And I think we got back there a little bit faster even than we expected. So that was a good stable period. We thought that we would stay there. But in this next phase, you see that we decreased a little bit. And some of that decrease was expected, but certainly it was longer and more frustrating than we had expected. And I've summarized here at the bottom some of the reasons for that decline. And as I say, some of them we knew were coming. Jaguar Land Rover stopped using our 3-liter V6 diesel engine at the end of 2019. We knew that was coming for 5 years. It wasn't a surprise. We ran that engine with JLR for 17 years. It was a really successful program. We did very well from it. I guess that we produced more than 1.5 million engines. So we had a really good run. The Ford F-150 changeover, we also knew that was coming. At the end of the year, they were remodeling for the new model year. So the production was down a little bit. And the F-150 is our second largest series production program. So that also suppressed the production. Year-end shutdowns, that is a normal thing. So we were expecting it. But again, it just added on to the pressures that were already there. And then you'll recall from the news that there was very severe weather in Texas. It got a lot of publicity. But that weather was also affecting the north of Mexico. And our second largest production is in the north of Mexico. All of the gas and the electricity supply was diverted to home heating, and much of the industry was shut down. And in fact, in February, we were down for 11 days on our production in Mexico. And in a month that only has 28 days, that made a really strong impact. In this time period, we also had the semiconductor impact. That's still ongoing. I don't think that we're quite halfway through that yet. Some industry analysts say that it will work its way through by September or August. Some analysts say that it will go until the end of this year. But in this list of things that hit us on top of the COVID, I would say that all of them are one time, all of them are behind us. But the semiconductors thing will continue to give headwind to our production. At the end of the year, we finished at 2.5 million engine equivalents. That's 25% down on 2019, but I don't really think that's the story. I think that the story for us is the second half of the year and the trend as we came out of this most difficult period back in the second quarter. In the second half of the year, we ran between 80 and 85% of our pre-COVID rate. And I can remember talking to people in January and February and saying, the demand is there. All of our customers are saying that they're really busy. They're struggling to keep up with the production. We just need a clean month to be able to show it. And finally, in March, we got a clean month, and the production went up to 3.5. So again, more or less at the pre-COVID levels. In April, which we published just last week, we were at 3.1 million engine equivalents. And I think this is where we belong. I think that going forward with many of these things behind us, we should be above 3 million engine equivalents. And we'll just have to see how the semiconductor plays out for the entire industry over the next months. I'd also like to look at our production from a longer term perspective. And here you can see our production over the last 14 years. And before the COVID, we had a compounded annual growth rate of approximately 15%. And what we see is that this year, our production went down by 54%, and we've started to recover. It's lasted for about a year. But what I really want to show with this plot is that these things are not uncommon in our industry. We all know that the economy is cyclical, and we had a similar pressure back in 2008-9 with the economic crisis. Our production went down by 58%, and that also lasted for about a year. Again, in 2012 and 13, with the economic pressures here in Europe And at the same time, we also had the emissions non-compliance of the Navistar 13-liter, which put a pressure on us, but we went down by 25%. And again, that lasted for about a year. But what we see in this very good plot is that you weather the storm, you get through the difficult period, and the growth returns. And I'm absolutely confident that the same thing will happen here. We're already through the worst of it. I think we've restabilized ourselves above 3 million. Let us stay there for a little while and establish that as the new normal. And then we'll start to grow again. I'm sure that we return to double-digit growth. I'm sure that we grow to 5 million engine equivalents. And I'm sure that there is growth beyond that as well. So if we look at our near-term growth, the first indicator is our recent order for the sampling cup, our consumable sampling cup. And as we said in last week's press release, March and April of this year were two of the highest 6 months in our history. And I think that the more interesting thing to see is that 2 consecutive months, they are the highest in history. You can see that September and October were back to back with about 42,000 sampling cups, but we beat that in March and April. Now, there's always variation in the order, and it's not a linear correlation, but it is a strong indication. And I think that this shows the market demand. It shows that our foundry partners are building their stocks for the production ahead. So it gives us a real confidence that this above 3 million is the new normal and that there is growth on the horizon. We'll also realize near-term growth from our new installation at the Scania foundry in Sweden. I think many of our shareholders will have seen the news clip on our website from Swedish television. And that installation was 3 years in the making. It was a very successful project for both Scania and SinterCast. We processed the first CGI ladle in February. We were all very proud that the very first ladle was in specification. That production will start in the second half of this year. It will ramp up over a 2 or 3 year period. So we'll see much of the growth coming from that in 2022 and 2023. But the production starts this year, and that will add to our near-term growth. So if we move from our near-term outlook to our longer-term outlook, let's begin with a breakdown of our current production. We are currently 60% passenger vehicle, 35% commercial vehicle, and 5% industrial power, which is applications like construction, rail, marine, and agriculture. I'd like to break down the passenger vehicle in more detail because it's our biggest sector. And we see that it's currently 67% Super Duty. So that means that 40% of our series production is currently for Super Duty pickup trucks in North America. 20% petrol, which means that 12% of our total production is for petrol engines. And 12% of our passenger vehicle volume is for V6 diesels, primarily for SUV, pickup, and some luxury vehicle applications. So that corresponds to 7% of our total production. And of course, there's a discussion now about the future of diesel, and diesel has declined. Over the last 4 years, it's decreased from 52% to 28%. But most of that reduction has been in smaller cars where the cost of the vehicle can't tolerate the on-cost for the diesel emission systems. In our vehicles, the larger SUV and pickup and luxury applications, the decrease hasn't been very much at all. And indeed, last year, diesel only declined from 31.6% in 2019 to 28% in 2020. So we haven't seen much of a decrease in that sector. And even if it was to decrease in half, it would hit us with something like 3 or 4% of our total production. So I don't feel a large exposure to that. But let's look forward to how we may be in a 10-year outlook. On the Super Duty side, this is really the domain of diesel. More than half of Super Duty pickups are purchased with diesel engine options. It makes a lot of sense for those large vehicles. And we see that that production will be stable or possibly even growing over the next 2 years. The petrol engine, our V6 petrol engine, there's a 2.7 liter version and a 3 liter version. It's been very successful. Over the last few years, Ford has expanded its production to other vehicles. We've increased from just over 20,000 per month last year to over 30,000 per month currently. So again, we see that production as strong and stable, potentially even providing a growth. It is certain that diesel for other passenger vehicle applications will decline, but as I say, we don't really have a large exposure to it. And let's see how fast that happens. So far, it hasn't been as fast as the media reports suggest. Commercial vehicle, and here we link back to the Scania, which will start this year and continue to ramp up. This is our strongest growth opportunity. And I think the shareholders will remember me saying that for as far as we can see, commercial vehicles are our largest growth opportunity. And that's definitely still the case. We see strong growth there. It will be the commercial vehicles that guide us toward 5 million and our growth beyond 5 million engine equivalents. On the industrial power sector, there will be growth there. On-road emissions requirements are being transferred to off-road applications. So off-road are going to have to follow the path that we've had over the last 15 years with on-road. That means higher pressure. That means a higher demand for strong materials. And we will have growth in that sector at all. However, it's a smaller production. And so even as we grow there, it will probably stay around the 5% penetration as the other sectors continue to grow. I say that commercial vehicle is our largest growth opportunity. So let's look at this in more detail. And over the last few months, each of the big three engine design companies, AVL, FEV, and Ricardo, have all published their roadmap for the future of heavy-duty commercial vehicle engines. And it was wonderful to see the consensus in these three. And what you can see circled here on the right is that the pressure will continue to go up. Today, the PFP, the peak firing pressure, is around 230 bar in commercial vehicle applications. And they're saying that it will probably increase further to 280, and that will need compacted graphite iron for cylinder blocks and heads. And if we move then to FEV, and you see their roadmap, they agree. In the first circle, it shows that the peak firing pressure will increase to between 270 and 290 bar, and that the materials will probably be CGI for the cylinder block and the cylinder head. And finally, if we move to Ricardo, we see a very good consensus with the peak firing pressure going to 280 bar, so a strong increase in the pressure on the materials, and that we'll need CGI for the cylinder block, the cylinder head, and the pistons. And I think that this consensus is so very powerful. It's these three companies that design most of the commercial vehicle engines, not only in the Western world, but also in Asia. And I've been saying for a long time, certainly for more than 5 years, that in the fullness of time, all commercial vehicle engines will become CGI. And so it's very rewarding and reassuring for the big three of engine design to come with the same statement and the same consensus. There's a lot of discussion in the industry and also in the media about the future of commercial vehicles. Will it be electric? It means battery vehicles. Will it be fuel cell running on hydrogen? Or will it be diesel, either running on diesel or biofuel or synthetic fuels or even hydrogen? I think we're a long way away from that answer. There's a widespread consensus in the industry that for at least the next decade, and probably for 15 years, perhaps even 20 years, the diesel engine will dominate, and we'll benefit from that, and that will be the basis of our growth. Before we wrap up, let's touch on our tracking technologies. I'm really fond of our tracking technologies. They bring Industry 4.0 traceability to the foundry industry. We have 5 installations currently. Just last month, we announced our 6th installation. It's a ladle tracker at the Hyundai foundry in Korea. 2020 was a difficult year for new installations. Investment was restricted. The foundries were putting money onto their current activities and expansions of their current activities. So it was a bit of a stall for new technologies, for the tracking technologies, but we'll continue to develop it. We'll continue to promote it. I'm sure it will find its place. I'm sure it will be a good supplemental technology for us. So in summary, we're well on our way to recovery to our pre-COVID levels. We're already above 3 million engine equivalents. That's a good stable base. We'll return to double-digit growth. I'm sure that we get to 5 million engine equivalents. I'm sure that we have growth beyond that. And commercial vehicles will be our main driver for growth. The Scania production starting later this year. We've already announced that the Scania installation will give 1 million incremental engine equivalents. Other engine programs will come on stream, and that will continue to grow. We've had a rather good start to our installation campaign in 2021. Coming out of 2020, when investment was really tight and there weren't a lot of budget commitments, I think we've done well to secure the Impro installation in Mexico, which will be commissioned in the third quarter. We've done well to get the Hyundai ladle tracker, which will also be commissioned in the second half of the year. And there will be more installations to come during the year. Tracking technologies, a really good little supplemental technology. We'll continue to develop it and promote it. I'm sure it will find its place. And I'd like to talk a little bit about our organization. Over the last couple of years, we've increased our manning from 20 to 30 people. So our focus now is to get all of the new people up to speed. This has established the organization that will take us forward. I don't see a big increase on the cost side of the company in the foreseeable future. So all of the increase in production will go directly to the bottom line, and we hope that from there it goes to the dividend. We have growth opportunities beyond 2030, probably to 2035. Who knows what happens after that? But I think we're in a really good place. I think we've got a good long run with good double-digit growth ahead of us. Thank you.